We are moving on to our featured event for the evening, Leaving the Duopoly. I have a little bit of a change that I need to introduce to you guys. If you don't follow Joe Walsh on social media, you may not be aware that his wife was diagnosed with cancer recently. Between her chemo treatments and a recent procedure, it became too risky for him to travel right now. So he is joining us virtually tonight, and we are still going to have a fantastic conversation. Please keep Joe and his wife in your thoughts. Joe Walsh is a former congressman from Illinois, a former presidential candidate, a radio host, and the host of the podcast White Flag. He's a man whose personal mission is to listen and find a path to unite, not divide. Let's welcome Joe Walsh to the LP Texas stage.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Joe. We're just going to try and switch the main screen so people don't have to look at me anymore.
I don't care if they see me. I just want them to hear me.
All right. Now we have Spike Cohen. He needs very little introduction in this room. We know him as our 2020 vice presidential candidate and one of the strongest and most consistent voices for liberty today. You can catch him regularly on Kennedy on Fox Business and pretty much everywhere else. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. Please welcome Spike Cohen.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And we all get to find out together, A, where I'm going to put this. Oh, that's good. I'm going to put it here. And also, we're all going to find out how long it takes for me to lift myself from this chair and just start pacing around in some kind of rant. We'll find that out together. But thank you guys for attending. Joe, thank you for being a part of this as well. And
it's good to be with you, man.
Absolutely, man. And I think we should probably start off. Everyone, I believe, in this room knows who we are. But I think probably the best way to start off is you and I share something in common. We probably share a few things in common, but one of the things that's pertinent to this is we are both former Republicans. And so I think it would probably be a good idea if we started off, and I think you should start, with what it was that brought us, the reason why we became Republicans, the reason why you became a Republican, and then in contrast, what made you realize that that Republican Party was not a fit for you?
Cool. And Spike, it's great to be with you and everybody down there in Texas. It's great to be with you. And I want to start by saying I'm sorry. I so wanted to be down there with you. Life happens, shit happens. I can't be there. If you can hear me, I promise we're going to have a pretty fun conversation. Look, I was a Republican my whole life. I was a Republican because generally since I was a kid, I believed in freedom and limited government. Of the two parties, the Republicans always came closest to that. I left the Republican Party 2 years ago when I ended my hopeless primary challenge to Trump, because the Republican Party had become an authoritarian embracing cult. And it's getting worse by the day. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm just kind of homeless these days.
Okay. I joined for similar reasons as Joe did. When I became a Republican, it was because I'm going to end up standing up. That's definitely, yeah. Let me go ahead and get up. When I joined the GOP, it was because I believed that that was the party of smaller, limited government, less taxes, less regulations. I was a very young business owner who just wanted to be left alone. Does that sound familiar? People in the crowd here? Yeah, yes. And the other thing that happened that made me become not just a Republican, this is when you get to boo me, a neocon Republican. Boo, yes, I know. Yes, yes. Boo, boo, yes, no, we all disagree with that. Yes, thank you. I was 19 when 9/11 happened, and I didn't have the context of the things that led up to 9/11 happening. And so when 9/11 happened, I 100% bought into the government and corporate media line that this was just terrorists out of nowhere decided that they hated us because we're just so darn free. And by free, there was sort of this vague thing, we can like wear the clothes we want to, pretty much, like, and listen to the music we want or whatever. And that that just burned them up. They just could not take that we were just so darn free. And when I would hear people say, well, no, there's a lot more to that, and you could actually listen to the reasons that the members that Bin Laden and I can't even remember his name now, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others gave in their fatwas why they did it, and the decades of U.S. intervention in that region. I didn't want to believe it. I chose not to look at it because that was a very uncomfortable truth that was nowhere near as comforting as the lie that we did nothing wrong, we were good, they're bad, they're Sauron, we're the hobbits, and we have to go and fight them. And there were some very annoying libertarians out there, like Ron Paul and Matt Kibbe and others, who would, from a conservative-sounding perspective, would say, no, this ain't it, Chief. This is not what you think it is, and you need to, if you want a limited government doesn't spy on you without a warrant. A limited government doesn't start and continue endless wars around the world. And once I realized they were right, which took a few years, but once I realized they were right, that made me kind of question everything that I believed, and that started on a journey to me becoming a libertarian. So I kind of skipped the political homelessness stage, and it forced me to look at what are my first principles. Do I even have first? At this point I'm in my 20s. Do I have first principles that are related to politics? If so, what are they? So I came here, like many of you, for very cerebral reasons. I read a lot of books and watched a lot of things, and that's what brought me here. So, Joe, I guess the next thing to bring up is, obviously, you're not a Republican, but you're also not a Democrat. Was there ever a point when coming out of, did you realize that it wasn't just the Republican Party, it's the duopoly, or was it also, was there a point where you thought, well, maybe I might be a Democrat, or maybe that appeals to me?
Hey, look, Spike, when I got to Congress, in about one afternoon, I realized what I'd always suspected: there's no fucking difference between the Republicans and Democrats.
Right, yeah.
There's no difference. Neither one cares about the debt. They're all part of the same club. So once I realized that, I spent my time in Congress going after both the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yep.
Since I've left the Republican Party, I've had people approach me, join the Democratic Party. I've thought about it. I think I'm probably too conservative for the Democratic Party. I have no home in the Republican Party. And I think this point needs to be drilled home. The Republican Party, this Republican Party, has given up on democracy. This is an authoritarian embracing party. And it ain't changing. It's not going to change anytime soon. I happen to think we're at a pretty weird point in American history where I do believe the two-party duopoly is ending. I think the Republican Party's dying. I don't know that the Democratic Party is too far behind.
Yep.
So I do think we're going to see a period these next 10 years where you could see the Libertarian Party becoming something, or you could see a brand new major political party.
Yeah, I tend to agree with all of that, actually. The one thing I would say is another thing that the Republican Party has given up on is any semblance of being about limited government. You'll notice that that's gone out the window. Like, they're not even pretending to watch a Republican pretend to care about the deficit under Joe Biden. You almost don't even see it anymore. I mean, it was Joe Manchin who has actually talked more about the deficit in the last year, because the Republicans, like, where are they going to say right now after working with Democrats in Congress and President Trump to pass $7 trillion in debt in one term? How are they going to, and I guess they do still pretend to be about gun rights, even as they watched Donald Trump pass more gun control executive orders than the last, I think 4 presidents behind him, or pretending that they care about private property rights when they watch eminent domain abuse happening across the country, largely under Republican governments at the local and state level. They're not even pretending anymore. They're not, it's like the mask is fully off, and now they're this sort of quasi-civic nationalist party wrapped in a flag, but they don't really have a purpose other than, if you hate Democrats, vote for us. I guess thankfully for them, that's kind of true about Democrats on the flip side now too. Democrats still talk about equality and fairness and justice and solving the problems of the marginalized, and then they demonstrate this by electing the architect of the last 40 years of the policies that people were literally out in the streets protesting, and his running mate, his VP, who was one of the most brutal prosecutors during all of that time. So at this point, Democrats and Republicans are running on almost the same level as sports teams. Now, of course, in Texas, I don't mean your sports teams. Your sports teams are good, and everyone else's sports teams are bad, and I don't care who that offends in this room. But in the other 49 states, there's this sort of, and I know it will make no sense to you as a Texan, but almost this weird allegiance to yes, this team is in a relative proximity to me, or I'm from where this team plays out of, and so I'm going to pretend that I really love them and hate other people. And some people actually do really love their team and by contrast hate other teams. The difference is that's sports. The Republicans and Democrats are playing that same team sports, except that the stakes are who has control of the nuclear codes. Who has control of the Federal Reserve? Which should be no one, by the way. That's the answer to that. But I know how to get an applause line. But it's become nothing but Trump bad, vote blue. Biden bad, vote red. Or AOC bad, vote red. And it's a good cop, bad cop routine. It is crucial that Republicans not just play good cop to their base, but also play bad cop to the other base. They need to be the bad guy for the other base, and the Democrats are doing the same thing in reverse. Because then both of them can get up on stage, having just spent the whole time savaging each other as savage, terrible hypocrites, but then also tell you, well, but you don't want to vote for anyone else. You have to vote for me, the lesser evil, because if you don't vote for me, the lesser evil, you're going to get this guy who I work with every day, who I assure you is a worse evil than me. It's a scam. It is a con, and the con ends when we are no longer being conned. So, it's I guess my next question to you, Joe, is obviously, you're a very prominent name. A lot of people know you. You're watching people go back and forth with this duopolistic talk. Have you tried to, or how much have you tried, if at all, to try to talk about, okay, yes, Trump is bad, and yes, what the things Trump has done is bad, but a lot of the things you dislike are also happening in the Democrat Party, or vice versa. Yes, Joe Biden has done and said these terrible things, but how can you possibly be against that but support Trump? Have you tried that? And if so, how has that worked?
Yeah, Spike, you and I may disagree on this, and maybe most folks in the audience will disagree with me. I think the Democrats are wrong on most things, but the Republicans right now are the greatest threat to our democracy. And because I think the Republican Party, and I talk to Republicans every day still, this is really important. They've given up on democracy to give them the stuff they want. When we talk about they love Putin and they want a strongman, it's true. Republican-based voters, I come from their world. I talk to them every day. For years they've been telling me, I don't care if Trump's a dictator, Joe, as long as he gives me the stuff I want. That's different than the Democrats, who are wrong on policy. They just believe in a bigger, more progressive government. They still believe democracy, the democratic process, can get that for them. We're at a scary point, Spike, because the Republican Party has given up on the democratic process. That's scary.
Yeah, I would agree on part of that. I think Republicans have largely given up on an idea of a representative government other than one representing them. I think it's become a very authoritarian thing. I will say I disagree with you that I think the reason the Democrats love democracy right now is because for at least the last few election cycles, it's been working for them. I'm trying to picture the people who think that they should be in charge of pretty much everything the Republicans do, and possibly even more so, if ever that system were to run afoul of their plans, would not turn around and be as authoritarian, or would not be as authoritarian as what we're seeing with Republicans. I think the difference we're seeing, and you can tell me where you may think I'm wrong, I think the difference we're seeing is we're seeing a party that is demographically losing in democracy and how they're responding as opposed to the other one that's winning in it. I don't see anything structurally in the one party that makes it uniquely more or less suited to participate in democracy if it were to suddenly start working for them. Like if suddenly there was this large surge of voting for Republicans, I could see the roles switch. You can tell me where you think I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know that I buy that. And Spike, you and I may disagree on this. I come from the right. Mm-hmm. I think there's something more prevalent on the right that wants to embrace an authoritarian.
Yeah.
I don't quite see to the same degree that impulse on the left. And look, I don't know that the Democrats are winning a lot lately. Look, Joe Biden's 180 years old. The only reason Joe Biden won is because he's not Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, exactly.
People voted for Joe Biden. So the Democrats have their troubles too.
Oh, no, I agree with that 100%. They definitely have their troubles. I guess my thought is, and I mean, this is why we are libertarians, is I do think that there's a lot of good cop, bad cop happening here. I do think there are differences between the parties, but I also think that when you have, it seems very interesting, and again, you were in Congress, so you saw it firsthand. There's a lot of infighting, but when it's time to pass the big omnibus, when it's time to print out trillions of more dollars that don't exist, to hand off to the cronies who are largely paying for both of the parties and their representatives to be in office, they suddenly come together in record time in a stunningly bipartisan fashion. I think the fact that every time I hear that something is being passed in a broad bipartisan manner, you can be assured that it is the most horrific thing that could have possibly been passed in both chambers, and then reconciled together and signed by whoever's in office. That's why we can get into differences between outlook or between policy. I think that when you have this much power, and I will say this as well, and this might get me booed, this might get where I disagree with everyone here. If this structure that is in place in government right now is in place and somehow libertarians take it over, does anyone here think that if that continued, that our party wouldn't eventually become exactly like what we replaced? If the structures are exactly I didn't get booed by him. But it's if everything is left in place, if the ability to tax and spend endlessly is left in place, if the ability, more importantly, to just print out money out of nothing, and the tax is the inflation of your value of your currency going down, if I can do that whenever I want to, maybe I'm not going to do it, maybe the guy after me is not going to do it. At some point, like Joe said, if the incentives are still there, it's going to draw people. It just may be the gold party doing it now. So the duopoly is a problem. The bigger problem is the actual structure of government itself, which is why we are libertarians. in not just party, but in our actual outlook and in our actual philosophy and belief. I became a small L libertarian long before I became a big L libertarian because it was the principles that brought us to that. So, go ahead.
To agree with you, Spike, I got elected in 2010. I was part of the Tea Party class.
Yes.
We were all about eliminating the debt and balancing the budget. Most of those guys that I got elected with, they got sucked into the political system within a year, and they were part of the club. I agree with you, Spike. When you're in Washington, it's a club. They're all part of the same club.
Yeah, well, I think it was George Carlin who said it's a big club and you ain't in it. And if you want to be in it, you have to be like them, or you end up walking away from it. So I think before I open questions up to the audience, I think just to give each of us a chance, if there is one thing that you want the people in this audience to know, that maybe they didn't know before it started, what is the one thing you want to make sure that they take away from our conversation and from this event?
Here's my biggest takeaway. And I said this when I was in Congress before the idiot Trump came on the scene. I think we are living in the third American Revolution. I think we're living in revolutionary times. I think some stuff is going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years. I think the two-party system is going to blow up. I think our political system is cracking up. I think there's going to be a viable third party. I don't know what that party is going to be. But throw everything you think about our politics out the window. We are in for 20 years of unprecedented change. It's going to be difficult, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And anyone who's thinking we're not in for quite a period of unprecedented change, imagine if someone had come up to you 4 years ago and said that the majority of the population would have been subjected to their state government telling them they're not allowed to go outside. And now this room would have been like, you know what, I believe it, right? But like the average person, because we believe that. Like I could pretty much tell you the government's going to do anything, and this group of people would be like, I believe it. It wouldn't matter what. And we're probably right. That's the scary part. But for the, I guess, the normies, the uninitiated out there, if we were to say that, they'd be like, absolutely not. That's not going to happen. And the proof of that is when countries in Europe and in Asia were already locking down, the majority of Americans were still like, that's never going to happen here. And when immediately, like days later, the state governments were like limiting large events and like the beginning of it, everyone's like, yeah, but they're not going to tell. And then they were like, yes, you have to stay inside. And how many people immediately were like, well, this is the new normal and we have to save lives. And it was like on a pin they turned. So the one thing I want to impart upon you before I start opening this up to questions from the audience is that the duopoly is not this magic structure that exists in two parties that if we could just dismantle them, it will go away. The duopoly is the natural result of people jockeying for positions of power over their actual principle. And you can clap for that. Do not ever let the fact that I'm talking stop you from applauding me. And if you want proof of it, look at the factionalism happening in this party right now. Part of giving up the duopoly is letting the duopoly go in here, letting this false binary thinking go in here. We talk about... Now, I don't have to tell you how that has to play out within the party. We have to start, well, I'm going to anyway, but I don't have to, but I'm still going to because you deserve it. We need to look at people as individuals, even if they're in that caucus we don't like, or that caucus we don't like, or they're not picking a side between the caucus. Those fence sitters, how dare they not want to get into this useless argument on the internet every day, right? As silly as those people are, we still have to respect them as individuals. The reality is there are good actors and bad actors across the factional spectrum in this party, and if you were to sit any of us down and ask us like 20 random policy questions, it would be unlikely for us, any of them, even the so-called opponents, to disagree on more than like 3 or 4 of them. Like, we agree, and we need to stop fighting. Now, that's how that works in here. Here's how that works in the rest of the world. I don't know how many of y'all still realize, and I find myself occasionally doing it as a former Republican, when you leave a cult, it's still in you for about 20 years. And it takes you a while to distance and divorce yourself and disengage yourself from that, deprogram yourself from that. For example, we are watching in Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine play out, that you have to either, there's this false binary in the political world, that either you have to decide that the U.S. and NATO have never done anything wrong ever. There's never been any provocation on the Western side. There are no bad actors in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin woke up one day and decided to just invade Ukraine for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Or you have to believe that this is all the U.S. and NATO's fault. This is all the Ukrainian government's fault. Every single person in Ukraine is a Nazi. All of them. And Vladimir Putin is waging a holy campaign to fight against the neoliberal Western elite. And it couldn't possibly be, and hear me out, it couldn't possibly be that there are a lot of people with way too much power who have been flexing it on each other and letting other people fight their wars and having innocent people in the crosshairs getting destroyed as a result of it. That is actually the most, especially if you're anti-authoritarian and you're a libertarian, that's actually the most consistent take to make on it. Yes, invading Ukraine was terrible. The atrocities we are seeing are horrible. Yes, U.S. and NATO have been expanding for quite some time and causing an incredible amount of tension as a result. Yes, there has been all sorts of corruption in Ukraine. Hunter Biden, right? Burisma, right? All of these things not only can be true at the same time, but it's actually the most consistent and easy for all these things to be true at the same time. When you watch shows like Game of Thrones, there aren't any good guys on it. Actually, there are. They're the innocent people, right? That's actually real life, minus the dragons. But the rest of that is real life. So the one thing I would impart on you is, as libertarians, we take things on an individual person basis and an individual issue basis. And if we ever find ourselves saying, well, yeah, there's a bad person here, but what about that guy? You're already going wrong. And it's time to take a step back. And I say that as someone who occasionally catches myself doing it and realizing that we have to do it. Leaving the duopoly is a long process, and it didn't just end with joining the Libertarian Party. So that's what I would say. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to comment on the internal libertarian divisions.
Sure. Sure.
If you ask me, I'll comment upon them. But I just want to quibble a little bit on your Ukraine, Russia, NATO, America. There's no perfect actor in the world, but we're a lot better than Russia. America is generally good. Freedom and democracy is generally good. NATO is better than Russia. Russia and Putin is evil. I'm not a neocon, and I don't want us going to war, but we're not all the same. We've got problems, we've done bad things, but we're not Russia.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, there are Russians who are risking jail time for many years or being disappeared protesting the war in Ukraine. So it's not even a Russia versus America or Russia versus the West thing. It's a government versus government thing. I would agree with you largely in Europe. I think that if you asked a lot of people that have been through what the U.S. military and government have done in places like Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria, you may get a different response on that. I get the point that you're making, and there's certainly no love lost for an authoritarian dictator like Vladimir Putin in this room. I can assure you of that. And basically the point I'm making is that it is not the false binary that we are presented with. And even if we can say one side is a better actor.
You're right. You're right, Spike. It's not the false binary.
Yep.
But but it's not what guys like Tucker Carlson say every night, that we're the same or we're to blame. We're not to blame for what Putin did, period.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. Well, no one in here is to blame for any of this, honestly. We've been the ones warning against all of this for quite some time. So with that, I will open it up to questions. And there's a microphone? Nathan's going around with the mic, and then and they can. Joe can hear the question, right? I don't have to repeat it.
I think so. Yes.
Okay. Cool. All right.
Can you hear me, Joe?
I sure can.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. I have a very important question. A couple weeks ago, someone who shouldn't be in Congress named Madison Cawthorn went on a show and said that all of these Republicans that he's respected for a really long time are having orgies and doing cocaine. How accurate is that to your experience in Congress?
Were you now, or have you ever?
Well, here's part of the problem. Madison Cawthorn, how old is he? He's 15 or 16. He's really young. I never saw any of that go on in Washington. I'm sure some of that went on before I was in Washington because they've cleaned up their act a little bit. What I find really curious is Republicans got pissed about that, but they didn't get pissed about anything else that he or Marjorie Taylor Greene said. But they got pissed about potential orgies, but I don't know anything about it.
Is it possible, Joe, that the reason you weren't invited to these cocaine orgies is that you weren't 16? Is that? So you don't know. I mean, it might have been happening, and they're like, no, he's way too not a child for this.
But, the serious point I was making is this. Madison Cawthorn is a punk. He's an idiot. I call him 16 years old. He's about as mature as a 13-year-old. Yet, he is a very popular Republican member of Congress. That's scary.
Where is Madison Cawthorn in Texas, or? Oh, okay. Oh, no, I was going to say, who's running against him was my question, my next question. Do you know what state he's in? Oh, gosh, that's in my backyard. Okay, I will talk with Joe Garcia. We will find someone to run against him, because I'm in South Carolina, and no thank you. I'm not much for cocaine or hookers, but which is weird in this group. Anyway, so next question. Here we go. Hey, Billy.
Good evening. Hey, Spike, Joe. So as the local community just sort of deteriorates and our local involvement in local community activities continues to deteriorate in society, political ideology has really become like an identifier, how people think of themselves. If I say, tell me about yourself, a lot of folks will start with, well, I'm a Republican, or, well, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Libertarian, a real one. Right?
Not when we do it.
Right. And so as that becomes such a part of our identity and how we think about ourselves, I think Andrew Heaton said that a lot of people fear social death more than they fear physical death. And if we're going to get people to change, to walk away from the duopoly, we've got to give them an off-ramp. We've got to give them a way to walk away from that without dying socially. What were your experiences walking away from that socially? Friends, family members? Did you have to call somebody and come out as a non-Republican? What was that like? And what could your friends and family have done to make it easier for you so that we can do it and help people walk away from this two-party duopoly?
Great question, man. I'll quibble with your premise. I think they're already walking away. I could be wrong, but I think Pew, for the first time last year ever measuring this question, more than 50% of America said they didn't identify with either party. They specifically identified as independent. Last year, for the first time in American history. So I think they're already walking away. I think there are a lot of people like me. I think there are a lot of people, Billy. I think 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, more people identified as Republican or Democrat. I don't hear that nearly as much anymore, and that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's certainly some people that still do, but yeah, it's not. I would tell you this, Billy, because happened to go around the country a couple of years ago to do this thing. Yeah, it was whatever. And so I heard a lot of people that would mention things like that. You asked about my journey. I've always been extremely, you're going to be shocked to hear this. I've always been very outspoken and opinionated about things. Yeah, no, thank you. I was equally shocked when I started doing it. But so I went very quickly. So I had more people that are like, oh, that's the opposite of what you used to say. And I'm like, yeah, I changed my mind. I read more, and it turns out I was wrong. And they're like, okay. So it wasn't, but I also didn't define myself by my beliefs. Like I had a life. Here's what I will say that I think is part of what you're talking about with social death, is the culture war that we're seeing. But the culture war really boils down to who wins. Whose way of doing things for themselves and their loved ones has to be imposed on everyone else. We're watching this play out. And by the way, literally do not care how you stand on this, okay? We're watching some states say that children have to be taught about LGBTQ things, even if and especially if their parents don't want them to. And then we're having other states that are saying your children cannot be taught these things, even if and especially if your parents want them to. Now, here's the good cop, bad cop routine. Both sides are saying the same thing. We don't give a crap what the parents want. We're going to have the government impose it on you. And they have, within the culture war, both sides are basically saying, in order to defend my rights and my beliefs, I want them imposed on someone else. And the government, in a broad bipartisan showing, are going to limit both of you and tell both of you how to live your life. Funny how that works every single time. The off-ramp we offer and the unification we offer is, and this is something Larry Sharp says all the time, I don't care how conservative or progressive you are in your own personal life. I don't care if you're a social traditionalist, or if you are at the bleeding edge of the newest things that people are talking about and doing, as long as you don't impose them on someone else. As long as you don't force them on someone else, then it literally doesn't matter. You guys can still argue about it on what you think or what you don't think, and you can choose to associate or disassociate as you wish. That's actually the best and most peaceful way to deal with it. But when you take out the coercive nature of government, you're literally it's people choosing how they want to live their lives. And the culture war ends when we stop engaging in it. And what we offer in this party, if we allow it to happen, what we offer in this party is a de-escalation of that culture war by saying, listen, you do whatever you want with your life. I don't care. If I agree with you, great. If I disagree with you, great. But we're not going to coerce others into things. We're not going to force others into things. I think that's a powerful thing. I think the other thing is, speaking to your question, Billy, what is it that made that person a Republican? What is it that made that person a Democrat? Because if what made them a Republican is that they want a small, limited government that respects the lives and rights of the people, blah, 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 well, we are that and we actually believe in it. If you joined because you wanted to protect, if you became a Democrat because you wanted to protect the marginalized and you wanted fairness and you wanted equal representation and all of these things, well, we offer an actual peaceful and sustainable way to do that stuff. We actually want to dismantle what Republicans and Democrats have done to harm the marginalized and to create such great gaps between those who have and those who don't have, right? So we have a better alternative to that. We're the things that you wanted, except we actually have a way to do it, and we aren't going to impose anything else on you. So I think that helps solve all of that.
Hey, Spike?
Yeah.
Can I add one thing to Billy and then
Sure.
ask you a question?
Sure.
Billy, so I think most voters have moved away from identifying as Republican and Democrat. That's a good thing. But when you are an elected official, or you want to be an elected official, or you're a leader in a party, whatever, or you're on talk radio or MSNBC or Fox, at that level, it's a lot harder to walk away because that is your identity.
No.
And like me, I was a Republican for my whole life. I was a Republican elected official. Once you walk away, you probably can never get elected again. Probably. And then for most of these guys who want to be congressmen for life, that's hard.
Just Namash, yeah. Yep. Justin Amash was a perfect example of that, right? He walked away. And now, meanwhile, I think he also wanted to walk away from Congress anyway, so didn't really care. But that was a big part of why he ended when he did, because he didn't have to worry about getting reelected, because he was done with getting reelected. So that's absolutely true. We have. Oh, sorry. Sorry. They're working their way there.
I was watching a video which you were being interviewed in, Spike.
Okay.
Talking about normies and how libertarians aren't wired right.
Yes.
And
no, that's not what I said. Yeah, go ahead.
You said something about us being engineers and talking very intellectual, and I didn't know you knew me. But actually, what I'm asking about was a follow-up on what you said earlier, that if we did get all, to be able to defeat the duopoly and take over the government, that we would become the duopoly. We would be just as corrupt, ultimately. Is there any way you see in the future, and either one of you can answer this, a system to ensure that we don't have the kind of corruption that we have in the federal government and in the state government?
Sure. So I'll answer this first because it was addressed to me, and then Joe, you can give your thoughts obviously on this as well. So first of all, I didn't say that we're not wired right. I said we're wired differently than most people. Like everyone absorbs information with some combination of intellect, emotion, and intuition. And it changes, it's different from person to person, it's different within that person from subject to subject, day to day, but there's always this kind of, some level of intellect, some level of emotion, and some level of just where it hits you in the gut. We are higher than I would say most are on the intellect. We're slightly lower on the emotion, although not as much as we like to pretend, because we are still emotional creatures. We're really, really low on the intuition part. We miss a lot of social cues. I know that's shocking to hear, but we miss a lot of social cues, which is why we have this really weird, you want to talk about false binaries, within the party between those who want to reach the normies by presenting ourselves in a relatable way, which is good, but also kind of watering down our message because it's scary. And then the other part of that false binary, which is that we need to actually know, we need to be full-throated and bold about our solutions to the problems we're facing, which is good, but also it doesn't care about anyone's feelings, which is pointless. And it's actually makes no sense. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We should actually be bold and relatable. I know that I'm sorry, but we should try to be bold and relatable. So the second part of that question was about the power. How do, when we get the power, do we not, be consumed by it? And the answer is to actively be dismantling it as we're working our way up, which is another part of why I believe in the local up strategy of getting people elected to more and more local offices, getting them up so that people can see our ideas, but also how our ideas play out, but also while we're there, again, hear me out, actually do them. Unlike the people we're replacing, actually implement them. I'm a big fan of nullify your way up, because we can show how at the city level a lot of bad state and federal law can be nullified effectively by refusing to cooperate with it. Then we can go up to the county and then eventually the state level and do the same, work our way up until eventually we didn't just take over because we had the best message or because our Twitter account, our Twitter game was the best, or we were able to somehow sneak someone on the debate stage without anyone knowing and trick everyone into becoming a libertarian and then trickling down liberty from the White House. But we worked, which is never going to actually happen, but we worked our way up by actively dismantling the oppressive structures that have been built by Democrats and Republicans, so that not only do libertarians win, but liberty wins. Libertarianism wins. We all win. By the way, as we become more and more successful, you will find that the Republicans and Democrats start co-opting our ideas. Good. If a Democrat gets elected on an explicitly libertarian platform, delivers on 40% of it, and we get to go, well, we're glad you agree with us, but why didn't you do the other 60%? That puts us in a much better position than we are right now. So that is my thought on that. So, Joe, any thoughts you want to give on the different?
Yes, Spike, I would just add to it. I think government is too big.
Yep.
And for most everybody who goes to Washington, you are consumed by the structure.
Yep.
And again, I want to say this: Justin Amash and I got elected together.
Yep.
There were about 30 or 40 of us in that class who called ourselves small L, hardcore Tea Party, fiscally responsible, limited government folks.
Yep.
By the end of 2 or 4 years, there might have been 5 or 6 of us left. Everybody else had been consumed by Washington. It's as long as government's that big, it's going to happen. I think we're at a point in American history where Washington cannot fix itself. It can't reform itself. Nobody who goes to Washington, I guess is what I'm saying, can fix it. I think the only change has got to come from outside of Washington.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, I believe. Now, I do think we can eventually have change to Washington. There's going to be a lot more change at local levels that's going to happen first. Because A, we have to actually have the ability to rein them in. B, we have to have enough people that agree with us to actually be able to mount a democratic offensive against it at the electoral level. And then C, people need to see that it actually works and trust in it and recognize that there may be temporary bad things that happen when you pull the Band-Aid off, but that the overall long term is that these things are going to be better once we have a smaller government that actually either respects and defends the lives and rights and property of the people, or is so neutered that it doesn't matter if they do or not. And that's what we as libertarians believe. And it sounds like you as a Tea Party conservative turned Tea Party spirit independent also believe that as well. We got some more questions? Cool.
My name is Girish. I believe that what we are facing today is not a moment in time, it's a flow, it's an arc of history. And we see authoritarianism and the divisions that go along with it, not just here in the United States, but across every part of the globe. Hungary, Poland, France, England, and those are just the good guys, or were. I think people get the government they deserve in large sense. And so where we have failed, and also that the arc of history is not the present time, but from the point of view of from the time of Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt and all of those guys, we have eliminated freedom as being the fundamental concept that brings us together. And so what we are seeing today is an example of winning, and the one who wins through the ballot box wins absolutely and gets to claim everything that's present not just in the United States, but the world over. Your comments.
Sure, I'll let you start with that, Joe.
Yeah, and Spike, you can stand on this. I think I agree. I've always felt that the arc of history does not move toward freedom. I think the arc of history moves away from freedom. I think freedom comes in a jolt, and people get freedom, and then over time, they fade away from freedom. They lose freedom. They no longer want freedom. I think we're in that arc right now in this country and around the world.
Freedom makes you can no. Don't let me interrupt your applause. Freedom is something. Was it Janis Joplin? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Yeah. So freedom makes the most sense when you're acutely experiencing the alternative in a way that's really harmful. Now you don't care what dangerous freedom, as one of the founders put it, it sounds like. You just want that. You want the chance to decide for yourself. The more comfortable you are, the more coddled and complacent you are, the less likely you are to want to be free. Freedom is out there making it work. A type of tyranny can be swaddled in a baby carriage and feel like everything's fine, the gilded cage. And I think that what happens is eventually when that facade goes away, like we're seeing right now, and suddenly the comfort, the chickens come home to roost on that comfort came with trillions of dollars in debt, the cost of living going through the roof, government having to start putting the screws to you. Now all of a sudden you want freedom. So I would agree, it comes in jolts. I think it's largely as a reaction to the logical consequences of tyranny. And by the way, that jolt isn't always good, okay? Reactions aren't always good. In fact, I'd say the majority of the time, they end up not going well. We've seen the left-wing version of that in places like Cuba and the former Soviet Union, where reactions to imperialism or fascism resulted in people saying, well, we should just eliminate all ownership of anything and we all own it together. And, this guy Karl Marx had some great ideas. We saw how that played out. Reactions to bad, what I would call neoliberal policy, is what led to things like the Nazis. And Adolf Hitler could not have thrived in any country that wasn't already desperate for another thing. So the fact that we're desperate, increasingly desperate, it provides an opportunity. Don't trick yourself into thinking that it's necessarily going to end well, because we're seeing the reactionary forces on multiple sides playing out. We offer something so much better. Not just a bad reaction that's going to swing the pendulum the other way and make things even worse, but something to completely dismantle that for good by putting freedom back in your hands instead of putting way too much power in the hands of way too few people and then being utterly shocked when they use it against us and for them. So that's what I would say to that, and I hope that history doesn't repeat on that, but that largely depends on the people in this room and in similar rooms like this around the country that I'm meeting. It is incumbent upon us to show people what liberty is and what it actually looks like, not just in theory, but in practice. Not just in policy practice, but in how we conduct our lives, how we deal with others, our general reason of being. In doing that, we can show what liberty is. We can get good candidates in winnable races, and we can show how liberty looks from a policy standpoint, and we can win hearts and minds. But it is not just the fact that things are going poorly does not automatically mean that people are going to embrace liberty. It means they're going to embrace something that they wouldn't have embraced before. That can be good or it can be terrible. And it's really up to us to figure out how that's going to end. So,
Spike, Joe, we've got time for about 4 more questions.
For 4 more questions? Okay. I order you to work out between you the next 4 questions. That ended poorly. Sorry.
I've got them queued up for you.
No, we're not. Okay, all right.
Already got it. Hi, I want to preface this question with 2 main things.
Okay.
First, it's been pretty obvious from my very little time in politics that Americans tend to only care about politics in election years. And we tend to let a lot of things slide whenever it's not election years. And second, even in our ideal world, were we to take every seat in every government, within 2 to 4 election cycles, we would be out of power. And so knowing these 2 things, what would you do to be able to curtail the power of the people that follow us in order to make sure that they don't infringe on our rights the same way they do now?
I just want to make sure I understand part of what you said. You said that if libertarians were to be swept into power into office within 2 to 4 cycles, we'd be gone.
Yeah, it's as with any party that gets in power.
Yeah, that's
any party that gets in power eventually will be wiped out by a counterculture that's built by them being in power. You see it happen with Republicans and Democrats.
Oh, just as a cycle. Okay,
exactly.
Okay, as a cyclical.
It's just a
thing?
natural thing. We can't avoid it.
Okay, Joe, do you want to take that first, or?
I'll take the first part, Spike. I generally agree that most people tend to only pay attention when there's an election, but I think that's changing. And you got to trust me on this because I engage with hundreds, sometimes thousands of voters every day, and I've been doing it for the past 8, 9, 10 years. Trump really woke a lot of people up that were not engaged. I'm seeing, and I've felt this way for a few years, left and right, and in the middle, a lot more Americans who never ever paid attention to politics beginning to pay attention. So I offer this as an opportunity to the Libertarian Party. I think America is kind of, I'm bearish on America. I think we're in bad straits right now. But the flip of that is a lot more people, especially young people, are engaged and they're looking. This is an opportunity for the Libertarian Party.
I agree with that. Obviously, that last part. This is a great opportunity for the Libertarian Party. I think and we may be saying this worded differently. The way I see it is, I think people actually care about politics all the time. They've been conditioned to believe that they only get to have a real say in it every 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever the election cycle is for that particular race. And so they kind of wait until then to even pay attention to who's running or what's being said. But politics is why gas costs as much as it is. And by the way, you're in Texas. Yours is still below $4, okay? But politics is why the cost of living is going through the roof. Politics is why an increasing number of people can't afford to live. Politics is why tens of millions, the majority of Americans, for at least some period of time, were told they couldn't go outside. Politics is why people had to choose between getting a vaccine that they maybe weren't ready to take yet, or wanted to find out more about, or are against vaccines or whatever, and having their work. And that's why. That's why, is because they have to show that they're doing something. But from a standpoint of what people are receiving, people are following the results of politics all the time. We have, I believe, been playing their game of saying the solution is voting for this candidate. That is a solution, but it also feeds into a media cycle that we are hopeless to compete against the major players in it. If instead we were on a regular basis meeting people where they were in their communities and saying, here is a problem that you are facing here is our solution to it, we are organizing to fight for or against whatever that thing is, and here's how you could help us, we could start getting people normalized to the idea of getting engaged in their communities to fix problems, to create solutions and fix the problems that they are facing right now. Which is why I've started my group, You Are the Power, is specifically to provide that earlier buy-in for people to get involved instead of waiting every 2 years, every 4 years, every 6 years to have their say. You can have your say every single day. And I think that's where we can win, because frankly, the Republicans and Democrats will not play that game with us. They don't want people engaged every day, because if people are watching this and being engaged every day, they're very quickly going to realize the scam that's being played on them. So this is a space that they refuse to occupy, and it's also our easiest way to achieve the goals that we have. So it's a win-win for us.
Hey, Spike?
Sure.
Can I push back a little and just give a warning to the Libertarian Party? I think the Libertarian Party needs to get its act together. I do believe this is an opportunity. I do believe there are a lot of voters who have given up on both parties. I do believe there are a lot of voters paying attention, and they do pay attention to both parties. I do believe there are a lot of voters that are just independent. I do believe within the next 4 to 6 years, there's going to be a shitload of money put into a brand new major political party. And there are people out there looking for something new. They're not looking at the Libertarian Party.
They're not.
And I think the Libertarian Party needs to examine why that is.
100% correct. Yep. I can tell you, Joe, especially in the last 2 years, we've been having those serious conversations. In fact, that's part of the reason we have the factionalism we have, is because there is this debate. What everyone seems to agree on, and I guess we're halfway there if you look at it that way, always the optimist, we recognize that there's been both structurally and relationally something that's been missing and or wrong with how we've been acting as a party. And anyone who follows me knows my belief on it. I think that we started as a protest movement and have yet to shed all of that. I think yeah.
What I'm about to say, you know. So I'm saying it for the other 200 million people listening to us.
Way more than that.
Yeah. I'm a small L libertarian. I've been that my whole life. From a small L libertarian, looking at the Libertarian Party, I see a party that I don't take seriously. I see a party that's not ready for prime time. I see a party of a bunch of kooks who fight with each other. And I'm a small, of all Republicans and former Republicans, I'm the kind of guy who should jump into the Libertarian Party. I'm just giving you my viewpoint, and that's me. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I want you to get your act together.
Yeah, this is... It's hard to hear that sometimes, but the reality is this is what I heard across the country, including from people who used to be in this party, who gave up. So there are a lot of changes that we're going to be making, and I am excited for you all to be along the ride. And we got 5 minutes? I don't know what this... Oh, you have a question. Oh, okay, I thought I was being officially told I had 5 minutes. Okay.
Our executive director needs to learn to get in line.
Yeah, he's the executive director, so I'm like, okay, what are you saying? You had a question. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Carol.
Okay, this question is not really too important, but this is to Joe Walsh. Did you meet Joe Walsh of the Eagles? Yeah. I mean, I saw the name, and I was really hoping for a good, but hey, I learned a lot from you tonight.
I've never met him. He and I have corresponded. We're sort of friends, but you know what? He's pretty libertarian. He's a small L libertarian.
I don't have any answer to that. I have not met Spike Cohen, the football player. So. Go right ahead. Do we have any other questions? Oh, hey.
All right. Thank you, guys. And I just got here late tonight, but fantastic convention. And thank Joe and Spike for this great debate. I'm sorry it's not live stream. I mean, the whole world. Eventually, it'll be on YouTube, right?
I would assume as much, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, here's my question. So you're worried about, the future of mankind, and I'll give you something to write down for all the young folks here. No history, no future. The best thing we have going for us is our history. Now, if you want the world to be a better place, then we all have to go out and help the world remember our history, right? We say it all the time. You can't remember history, repeat. Can't remember history, repeat.
Yep, doomed to repeat.
Yeah, right. Anyway, so my thinking is that Constitution thing that happened, 200-some years ago, wow, that's something we could all learn from again if we took the trouble. And why not just kind of get rid of the Oval Office and get rid of the deep state? Why not just rely on the states, the respective states? Does that make sense? I mean, is this too much to ask that we would just let the respective states govern our country, 1 week at a time or 1 month at a time or whatever? Let it rotate. Why do we have to have the deep state?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. I'm giving you a yes. It's too much to ask for. Yes. And if the Libertarian Party pushes something like that, they'll never be taken seriously. Look, I may agree with you, and back at our founding, I would have supported the Articles of Confederation. But that's not where we are now, and that's certainly not where most Americans are ever going to be. Period.
I agree that that's not where they are now. I disagree that that's where they're ever going to be. I think that long before, I think we go into these groups and these meetings and we talk about how we're going to change the world, and we realize that, or we don't realize, or we choose to put aside the fact that this culture is overwhelmingly in favor of being told what to do. And when I say overwhelmingly, I don't want to depress anyone here, but it is hard to, there are self-described libertarians who want to be told what to do. It is pervasive in our culture, which is why whatever liberty we're able to achieve, whether it's going all the way back to the Articles of Confederation, or even just the Constitution, or even just no longer growing this massive Leviathan government we already have, which, by the way, I just want everyone to remember, it's growing right now. Like, it's going to be billions of dollars and many people bigger tomorrow than it is today. And the culture overwhelmingly is going to disagree only on who should be in charge of it, but not if it should exist or whether or not it should be bigger. That's almost unanimous. There is large consent. Our opinion right now is within the margin of error for opinion polls. I believe that can change. I think that's where Joe and I might disagree. But it's going to require us doing the work, making changes culturally in our community by demonstrating how our solutions work. Not just talking about it and then calling people status bootlickers when they don't immediately adapt our ideas, but instead demonstrating, not that that can't also be a useful strategy, I'm sure, but also by demonstrating how it actually works. Meeting people where they already agree with us. Oh, you agree with us on gun control? Great, let's work together to make this county or this state a Second Amendment sanctuary. Oh, you agree with us on criminal justice reform? Fantastic. Let's work together on ending qualified immunity or on bail reform or on any of the myriad of things we agree with on criminal justice. Oh, you agree with us that the war on drugs has been an abject failure, a renewal of prohibition, which was a failure as well? Great, here's what we're going to do to decriminalize cannabis and psychedelics and things like that. People agree with us. Large numbers of people agree with almost every single part of our platform. It's just who agrees with us that's different. So we're going to need to work with people to accomplish those goals. Now, the one thing I will say is when people ask me what I believe in terms of government, I don't shy away from telling them that I'm an anarcho-capitalist. But I also say, in saying so, I say we're nowhere near that. It's foolish to even try to push for that right now. And right now, I want to work for people to be free. I will even say, I don't even know if that's an achievable, much less sustainable thing that is even exists. It's just where my morals took me, where my values took me. What I care about is people being free, and let's work together on that. One small thing at a time. And you saw how long it took us to get here? You want to talk about history? How long it took us to get here? It might take us that long to get back. But we do that work to make us freer. Go ahead, man.
Hey, Spike, just two quick things to add to what you said. In this arc of history where we're at right now, you're right. The vast majority of people in America do not want freedom right now.
Yep.
We need to change that.
Yep.
But really what the Libertarian Party should be focused on, get some people elected.
Yep.
Get a few people elected at every level of government. Get people elected.
Yep, absolutely. And then not just getting elected, but then demonstrating what we actually do as a contrast. We don't just show up and now we're the lesser of three evils. Now we should, instead of two, now you get three colors to choose from, not just two. What an amazing time for America. But actually demonstrate what libertarianism means and what the principles of that mean. I think we have time for one more question.
Spike, I have a public education. I said four questions ago. I got three left. Is that okay?
Yes, is that new math? Fantastic. Answer the questions more slowly, Joe.
So it's actually a perfect segue to my question. We're talking about there are a lot of Americans who actually agree with most of what's on our platform, and they just probably don't even know it. So my question, and I'm not suggesting we do this to our party, so this is hypothetical. If somebody waved a magic wand and tomorrow there were no political parties, do you think that, A, the actual thinking of most Americans would lead us to being a more libertarian country, or do you think the power club that's already there would say, nah, joke's on you, we were one party the whole time, and lead from there?
I think that in libertarianism, we talk about the Rothbard button, right? If you were to press a button and make it go and make government go away, would you press it? Only the real libertarians would press the button, right? But the thing is, there is no button. But if there was one, if magically we made government go away, everyone would turn around and go, "What the hell did you just do?" And they'd go immediately towards building government. I believe that if we magically made political parties go away, they'd just build them again, because the problem isn't the GOP Inc. and the DNC Inc. As specific individual organizations. They were created out of the power, the ungodly and growing concentration of power in way too few hands. And inevitably that's going to lead to this endless factionalism that is largely going to break into two groups. And by the way, the reason it breaks into two groups is because we have first past the post voting. Like that's, otherwise, then we'd have like 6 evil monster parties to choose from. Like which is why I believe plural voting is good, but it's not the solution. The solution is dismantling big government and what they've built. But going back to your question, I think you were talking more as like a hypothetical. If we could actually make parties go away and people would want that, what would happen after that? I don't necessarily think they're one party all along. Like they get together, and say, how are we going to pretend that we're two different parties and keep fooling people? It ain't that far off though. They do get together all the time. They do pass whatever the hell they need to get money from the major corporate cronies that put both of their parties in office. I do think there are two different parties, and I do think that there are different ways of thinking within those two different parties, but it largely comes down to which one of us gets the most power. But we're cool with you having the less power because you're our flank against someone that would come in and dismantle this whole thing, if that answers your question. Joe?
I think if you wiped away both political parties tomorrow, they would come back, but I think more than 2 would come back.
Yep.
I think 3 or 4 would come back. And I think also, if you wiped away all 50 states tomorrow, I don't think you'd make one country. I think you'd make probably 4 or 5 countries.
Yep. Yeah. I think now 300 million Liechtensteins, right? I'm sorry. You will be next. I'm sorry.
Thank you all for your words of wisdom. I appreciate y'all's presence, and I'm sure we all do.
Well, thank you.
You both have talked about solutions. You both have mentioned the debt. What are you going to do? What is your solution for the debt, given that default would cause worldwide chaos, would remove $30 trillion from the world GDP, would also be the biggest swindle in world history, including Hitler, Mao, and Stalin. What would you do about the debt?
Do you want to take that first, Joe? Or you want me to?
Yes, Spike, I'll just say one thing, and it's the same thing I said 10 years ago when I was in Congress, when the debt was $12 trillion. The one big area, and still the fastest growing area of our federal budget, is health care for all these Americans living longer and longer and longer. Social Security, Medicare, and even Medicaid at the states, and now Obamacare. We got to wrap our arms around this healthcare piece, all these entitlements. That's the biggest piece of the debt, and it's the fastest growing, and they need to be cut dramatically and reformed dramatically.
So I'm going to answer that by kind of going in reverse to where the problem is, and then stepping back to the solution on it for that. The reason that the government runs up endless trillions of dollars in debt is because they can. It's just very simple, they can. And they tax us just enough to keep our currency legitimate and to pay off a little bit, pay off the interest and some of the, the current amount that's being spent. But it is a system, it's a game of Monopoly. And it is a game of Monopoly where the vast majority of players, 299 million or so of the players, or 300 and however many million of the players, are playing by whatever the rules are. And there are a handful of players that when it's their turn, they go to the banker and say, I'd like $1 trillion Monopoly notes, and stick the rest of the players with the bill for it. That's the problem. Every other single thing, whether we're talking about, and I'm glad that Joe brought up healthcare or entitlements or education. There's a student, wait till you see how they want to handle the student debt bubble that they created. All of these are happening because they can. If our government was not able to print out endless debt, then they would be forced to actually look at what they're doing. They would have to actually spend within their means, because they can't tax us 200+% of our income. That's not physically, that's not possible. They can try, but they're not. You can't give twice as much as you actually have, right? So, which is how they're spending right now. They're spending like more than roughly double what they're bringing in. So that's not an option, right? So what it would force them to do is to prioritize what they would actually spend on. The other part of that is that in doing that, we also need to talk about why the problems are there. You know, we see this endless fighting over who should be paying this large and growing bill for healthcare, whether it's the taxpayer, whether it's the patient, some combination of the two. But then there's very little talk about why it's so damn expensive to begin with, right? They don't talk about certificate of need laws. They don't talk about the scam that is the insurance system that only came about to get around FDR's proposed wage caps from nearly, 80 years ago now. They don't talk about that stuff because it would force them to admit it's our fault, and the solution is us having less power. With education, higher education, they're not going to say the reason that the cost of education is going through the roof is because of the Pell Grants and subsidies that are removing the cost equilibrium from the market and allowing them to jack up the price however much they want. Or that another big part of the problem is the fact that they have created so much burdensome occupational regulations that make it so that people that are like cutting hair and braiding hair are having to go and run up thousands of dollars in debt to go to school to learn, quote unquote, to do something that they already know how to do or could have learned from some easy on-the-job training. We could talk about this with literally everything. If you remove their ability to just endlessly print out notes, and if you have the market defining what currency is and what its value is, it forces government to be more accountable, and it requires us to actually take a step back and say, why was all this stuff so damn expensive to begin with? It didn't used to be. Why is it so expensive? So you're talking about default, which is, I think everyone here knows, but just in case, you're talking about shrugging off the current debt. As long as this government exists, that debt's going to have to be paid off. Because if there were a default on that debt, if the government just shrugged and said, well, I guess we can't pay this back. We saw what that did to the world economy when Greece did it. We've seen what it does to the world economies when much smaller economies do it. If the world's largest economy, which also holds what is, for most vast majority of countries, the world's reserve currency were to do it, I can tell you right now, whatever you may have been told on it, it will be horrific. It will be horrific. Now, there are many more conversations to be had about how to do that, but what I will say is, I think that as long as this government exists, that debt has to be paid off. We may be able to look with a fine-tooth comb and say, yeah, no, this multi-trillion-dollar crony banking system, maybe we don't have to pay them back. There are however many billions of dollars that are in it, or this multinational corporation that was basically, playing both ends of it. Maybe they don't have to be paid back or something like that. But the bulk of that is going to have to be paid back. I do think there is such a thing as the possibility, and there are people much smarter and more informed than me on this, on how to do it. But if we truly did move towards a more free market system of currency, where it was the market determining what currency is, and we found out the bank that no one's using anymore gets owed a bunch of money to the government that can't run up debt anymore, maybe that could be defaulted on. But I do think that before we can even have that discussion on how that would be dealt with long term, we have to cut the faucet off now, and that requires the advocacy for first auditing the Fed so that people can see what the hell the Fed actually is. And then when that organization fails that audit harder than any other organization ever could, moving to end the Fed and replace it with a free market system of currency. So that's what I would answer that. And I think we have and
one more,
this,
right back.
this lady here is all questions.
In order to achieve the critical mass to win elections, how do we convince people that the Libertarian Party has a chance?
I think we have to win where we already have a chance. So part of the problem is that all of our heroes, I cringe when people say, and I appreciate it and I love you for it, but I will hear people say, Spike Cohen is one of the leaders of the party.
I got 1.2% or 1.6, who cares? I got less than 2%, okay? I need to be your hero. Your heroes are people that have gotten elected into office and have demonstrated what that looks like. There is a lady in California named Kalish Morrow who ran for city council. The first time she lost, although it was pretty close. The second time against a very, very, very well-funded Republican incumbent in a deep red county of California. She won her election. Now, not only did she win her election, but she immediately went to work on talking with the other city council members about why she was no longer a conservative Republican and why she was a libertarian. Long story short, we now have a libertarian majority in that town. And a libertarian mayor. Because she literally converted them. And they didn't just, I can assure you, they didn't do it for electability reasons, okay? They did it because she was able to demonstrate to them why their proposed or professed principles were actually exemplified within the Libertarian Party. I can tell you about Kara Schultz, a woman who got elected. Sounds like I don't even have to. But for those who don't know Kara Schultz was battling what she was told was end-stage cancer. And she knocked on something like 1 out of every 4 doors in her town in Burnsville, Minnesota, suburb of Minneapolis. So not a rural town. And she knocked on doors until sometimes she actually passed out. I'm not telling you to do that, but she did that. And she got elected. And as a result of that, there's now her and I believe 2 others that are in that council as well. And they have proposed things that are wildly popular with the population in Burnsville. Like, for example, allowing a portion of your city taxes for you to choose what part of government it goes to. To have a feedback mechanism for voters to vote with their wallets within government. Now, of course, that didn't get implemented, and the people who didn't, the majority there that didn't implement it, are now wildly unpopular as a result of that. Those should be our heroes. We should be centered. When people say libertarians can't win, don't say, that's not true. Listen to Spike Cohen, who didn't win. He'll explain it. He didn't win. No. Our answer needs to be putting first and foremost at the forefront the people who have won their elections and demonstrated how libertarianism works in actual output, in actual policy, in actual, not just theory, but in actual application. When we do that, the conversation shifts from libertarians can't win to, wow, look at what libertarians are able to accomplish in these, local races. Imagine what they could accomplish in the State House. Imagine what they could accomplish in the governor's mansion, in Congress, in the White House. But the conversation shift has to start with us. If I come from the sales and marketing world. If I showed up to your house and said, hi, my name is Spike Cohen, and I have a fantastic product. It's the best product you'll ever hear about. No one wants it. No one wants it because they're idiots. But before I let you go, I need you to know, no one is even letting me advertise my product in their catalog. They won't even talk about the fact that I have this product. And you're going, well, this product sounds fantastic. Why don't you tell me about the product? I go, no, friend, let me first tell you that every odd is against us for me to even be at your doorstep to tell you about my fantastic product. In fact, in some places, they're trying to make it effectively impossible for me to even tell you about my product. In fact, it's really, I can't even sell you my product. And then you respond by saying, well, Spike, it sounds like I can't buy your product. And I go, you son of a bitch. That's the conversation we've been having with people because the Libertarian Party comes from a culture of losing proudly. We started as a protest group. We ran presidential candidates who got hundreds of votes, sometimes thousands of votes, for years. We were just protesting that Nixon took us off the Bretton Woods gold standard. That's literally what this party was founded for. It wasn't even considered a party by many of the people who founded the party. Somehow, despite ourselves, we even got hundreds of people elected to office. Imagine what happens if we actually act like a party. Imagine what happens if we develop a culture of winning instead of blaming the person next to you or in the other aisle over from you for why we can't win. But that starts locally. That starts locally. So, thank you. And sorry.
Spike?
Go ahead, Joe.
No, I got a real short answer. Here's what you ought to do. Yes, you should focus like a laser beam on local races. Get people elected locally. You should try to elect strategically a couple members of Congress and slowly grow it. And you need some sort of you need somebody or a group of people traveling the country, talking to groups of people around the country, but focus on local elections.
Yes. Everything he just said is what You Are the Power is doing, going into, or is actually already doing, because we've been doing it as a proof of concept with it in all but name. Hi.
You just answered my question. So
Oh, no.
it was over getting people elected, and my question was which positions should be penetrated first and would make the biggest bang for our buck.
One thing that I've seen that I don't know about this state, but in other states that has been woefully utilized or underappreciated is sheriff. And I think it's because we're libertarians and a lot of us don't like police. And so that's my theory. It's like, wait, am I being a cop? I don't want to be a cop. But here's the thing. A sheriff is the second highest law enforcement official in that given county. And because it's elected, and because of their position in that county, or at least in most counties, they can decide what's being enforced or not, or the priority in which things are being enforced. Imagine if we had libertarian sheriffs across the country who refuse to participate at the federal or state level with the war on drugs or the war on guns, and instead laser focused on people who are violating people's actual rights and lives and property. So the crime rate would plummet, the jail populations would plummet, the overdose numbers would plummet, the number of people moving there because of how much better it was from nearby towns and counties would go through the roof. We could demonstrate it by bringing in libertarians that are doing that. Now, you notice I said that they're the second highest level of law enforcement in their county. Anyone want to guess what the highest, in that system, the one people using the Anglo-Saxon system that includes sheriffs, what the highest elected law enforcement, or the highest law enforcement official in that county is? Coroner.
What?
They don't flex it often, but they're in those counties that have that sheriff system, it's the coroner. Why? I've yet to actually find out why. I've looked it up, and there's not a solid answer as to why, but technically they're the highest elected official. What happens if a libertarian gets elected coroner and no one gave a crap until they started actually moving their weight around? So I think that's another one that we should be looking at, as morbid as that is. But I think that, and then without getting into every specific race, I think that anything that maximizes our ability when elected has this weird combination of not being a sexy race, so maybe other people aren't paying attention, but can actually make a huge impact if we get into that, when we get into those offices, to demonstrate libertarianism as policy from that office, through reductions in government, through nullification and things like that. I think that's what we should be looking at. Anthony Welty ran for insurance commissioner in Washington State. No one gave a crap. No one was even trying to run. The incumbent ran against him in some whack job that the Republicans found. I know that's surprising to you. Ran against him. He got more votes at the state level than any other libertarian has ever gotten, including our presidential candidates, on an insurance commission. And had he actually gotten elected to that, insurance commissioner would have been involved in not just all the stuff related to insurance costs and insurance regulations, but also to vaccine mandates. That insurance commissioner ended up being largely the lockdown and mandate commissioner in Washington. So it is surprising that some of these less than sexy sounding elected positions can have an incredible amount of actual power. We should be identifying those and running people in them, especially at the local level. Joe, any thoughts on that?
Hey, it's what he said. You should do what you should have been doing 30 or 40 years ago. Local, every position.
Cool. Is there anything else?
Joe Spike, I think that is about it. If you guys would each like to take 30 minutes or 30 seconds or so. I think another hour. We good? Another hour? Take another 30 seconds and just wrap up what you'd like to say to LP Texas.
I'll start. I'll take 30 seconds. Again, awesome to be with you tonight. We are at a major inflection point in American history. It's a great opportunity for the Libertarian Party, but you got to get ready for prime time. You got to get ready for prime time. Thank you.
As I say very often, when Liberty wins, Liberty is going to win, and when it wins, it will be because of you. And that's not just a pander. It is a pander, but it's not just a pander. What I mean by that is that no one else either wants or is positioned to do what we're trying to do, which is liberate this country and our society through the electoral process and through the cultural process that we're doing. No one else is actually trying to do that. No one else wants to do it. It has to be us. I'm not speaking for Joe, I'm speaking for myself. It has to be us, or it's not going to happen, which means we have to do the work for it to happen. Instead of preparing ourselves for who we're going to blame in this room when it doesn't happen, we have to look at where we have won, which has happened over 1,000 times in our party's history. We have won elections. So it's not some magic unicorn. It literally happens. Look at how it happened, and then keep doing that, and scale it up and replicate it so that we can actually make this thing happen. And the last thing I'd say is I appreciate you guys all being here. I am happy to, I'm going to be hanging out here for a while as well. If anyone wants selfies, autographs, whatever else, at some point I'll be swinging by the Mises thing at Alamo. If you're going over there, I'll see you there. I love y'all. You guys have my heart, and I appreciate, and thank you, Joe, for being a part of this.
Thank you, Spike. Thank you, Spike.
I appreciate everyone for all your questions and everything else. And I love you guys. Let's go win for liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.